Hi, welcome to Critical Hit. I'm Matthew.
I'm David.
I'm Kyle.
Today we're talking about House of Cards, a show available only on Netflix. It's been going on for, I think, 3 years now, and it's just entered its third season this month. Basically, the show is loosely inspired off of a British series of the same name, and it is about a man named Frank Underwood, who's a congressman, who, in the first episode of the first season, you see that he's been playing his cards right to get vice presidency, and it just so happens that he gets snubbed for it. So he and his wife, Claire, orchestrate this beautiful masterpiece conspiracy to undermine the president and take his throne. So you watch his plans succeed and fail throughout the 3 seasons in a very dramatic and intense show. And personally, I'd say phenomenal as well. So what do you guys think?
He ultimately becomes the president of the
Yeah, he
United
ultimately
States.
becomes it and then the consequences of that as well. So it does this really clever build up to that, and then it just tears him down again. It's all good. Yeah. So, but what do you think?
Personally, I really enjoy this show. I think Spacey and the rest of the actors are phenomenal. Robin Wright and the rest of them, they're all very talented. The characters are fascinating. The way that they manage to do politics without having to constantly paint one side good or bad is a way that anyone can really get into this show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it.
Well, both sides are just so bad.
Yeah,
that you don't feel like guilty for being
you're able
able
to enjoy.
Well, I think it actually helps that Frank Underwood, he doesn't really have a political agenda besides just gaining power for himself.
Yeah,
right.
It's interesting because it's a political show, but I would say it's not a politics show. I've seen political dramas, and this one is just a really good drama.
Yeah,
I think that's I certainly agree with you on that. I really like the show. I think that it's clever in its use of. In its understanding of how politics works, how the different branches of government work, it's very creative, and there's a nice interplay going on, and I think it's fantastic. Just the way they're managing to work with the drama within the party, the drama between the two parties, and then when you get the other systems of government, public opinion, international issues, it's just piling them on top of one another into this beautiful network that Frank can then navigate and work his way up the whole way. Yeah, it's a great show. I like it. I think that season 3 might not be as good as the first 2 seasons, personally.
Yeah, I agree with you. I completely agree.
But even so, it's still, I would say, it's one of the best things that I've seen lately.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I actually really loved season 3. In fact, season 3, I felt like it got rid of a lot of the flaws that I saw in the first 2 seasons. I remember. I thought the pacing was straightforward. One problem with the previous series, I thought that sometimes it got too mixed up in the politics. Whereas I felt like the third season, it was always able to keep it it always kept it very personal in the sense.
Mm-hmm. It's very focused on the individuals.
On the individual characters.
Yeah.
And I think that it really, it even felt more realistic as a show overall, because previously, Frank's rise to power, it was always a little bit too easy isn't the right word, but it happened too quickly.
It was very quick.
It was only like 26 episodes.
Well, yeah, but I mean, in the span of a few years, he rises. How many positions does he go through? And one thing I liked so much about season 3, though, is it actually showed the consequences of that. Where it's okay, sure, he became a president.
Yeah,
he became a president by getting the actual president impeached, and then he took the role.
The threat of being a placeholder,
and that's what he had to deal with. I mean, even to draw from actual history. I mean, that's what happened with Gerald Ford. Where he was never able to get out from under Lincoln or under
none can escape Lincoln's shadow.
under Nixon's shadow, and ultimately that was what killed his presidency. And Frank Underwood, he has to deal with the same challenges.
Yeah, it's interesting because you have the end of season 2 where you're just as a Frank Underwood fan, you're like, oh, you brilliant evil man, you've done everything, you succeeded. And then as soon as season 3 begins, it's just this downfall of just oh man, all that stuff that you thought was going to happen is just falling apart right before him.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm in the same boat with Kyle more, where when it was only season 1 and 2, this show was my favorite show, by far. But now with season 3 out, it's one of my favorite shows. So it's gone down a notch.
Here's the thing that ended up happening with this. You have in the first season, he's in the house and he's working his way up. Okay? And so you've got this it's government, so it's big, it's interesting, but it's still very contained.
Yeah.
And then after that, when he gets his way into the vice presidency, we've gotten to a larger scale. And it continues to escalate until the point where he becomes the president, and now we're dealing with international issues. Now, the thing is, he's not going to become President of Earth next, and then
Yeah,
President of the Universe.
It can't go much bigger.
It's not
than President.
getting bigger.
Yeah.
So they had to figure out a way to do this, and I think that by focusing in by the end of the season on the intimate issues between him and Claire and focusing on that space was a really nice way to show you that this show can continue without having to constantly be upping the scale.
Up in the ante, yeah.
And it proved by bringing in characters like President...
Victor Petrov,
Victor
the Russian
Petrov,
president. Such a good
that
character.
It can do those
Putin,
big...
basically.
Yeah.
Basically Vladimir Putin.
I mean, Victor Petrov, Vladimir Putin. They weren't being very subtle.
Hey. No, I don't think subtlety...
President Putanovich.
But they did a good job of showing you that they could scale up, and they kind of promised more of that. While at the same time, it's not going to be one of those instances where this time there's two bad guys, or it's one of that. It's a bigger threat. Now it's a larger plane, or whatever the action movie trope would be.
What I love, what it's doing, it's elevating the action by making the character drama heightened, not something surface level. Like, I mean, in the first two seasons, Frank actually killed people. In the third one, he doesn't in the same way, because, I mean, some people might try and say, okay, we had him kill people in the first two seasons, we have to have him kill more people now.
He needs to kill more people. He needs to kill a more sympathetic person.
But they don't do that. They up the drama by challenging the characters themselves.
Well,
they do challenge the characters. They kind of reverse engineer what we like about the characters in the third season.
Yeah.
Because, for instance, this actually explores a really interesting side of American politics in that it shows some of the monotony and impotence that comes with the seat of the president.
Oh yeah.
And Frank he's kind of locked in there, and he's very restricted in what he's able to do by the time he's actually become president and achieved his goal.
Well, and part of it is he's having to deal with the consequences because he's made so many enemies on his path to the president.
With that rise that we were talking about, there's so many repercussions.
Well, even in the first episode of the third season, it's so interesting because you get so much of the show in the first two seasons are all about Frank Underwood and what he's doing. And for the first time, you get to hear about the outside world's opinion of him, and he's like at an all-time low on the polls.
Right.
People hate him. And
having Stephen Colbert on there was actually...
Yeah, that was so great! But, like, you have this interesting character work. Like, the entire show, you watch for the characters. Let's be honest. Like, the character work is so good. But you have this one character who is trying to readjust, like, how to make enemies into friends, to the point where he's also losing friends doing that. And so it's a very interesting season in that sense, but there are other problems I had with season 3. But let's keep talking about, like, character work, because like I said, I think that is, like, the point of the show is to get you attached to these individuals who are in politics.
So, Frank, then?
Yeah.
Okay, Frank is a fantastic character. He's incredibly selfish. He's charming. He's ridiculously charming. He's got that
southern charm.
He has southern charm.
He's a sociopath.
He is a sociopath. He's incredibly funny. Kevin Spacey knocked it out of the park with this character's humor. Well, it's just this masterful deadpan that's going on the whole time. And it's just so well done. And the way that they managed to use the sort of Shakespearean aside to add this whole other level where you as the viewer can see the difference between what's going on in Frank's head and the way that he treats the rest of the world.
Well, and one thing I like so much about the asides is you almost it adds to his character because you almost get the impression that he's so in love with his own abilities that he enjoys telling you about how smart he is.
He does.
It's Richard III. Like it is literally Shakespearean where he leans aside.
Now is the winter of our decision.
He leans aside and tells you how great everything is going, or like tells you how much of an aid this guy is, and how he's gonna use him as a tool, and just goes right forward and you just watch him do it. Like,
and he just he loves like
it's so good.
He loves that he has someone to tell.
Yeah,
I mean, it's almost like he's aware of the TV show he's in.
He's aware. Like it's weird because you have these asides where he talks directly to the camera. And although there is humor in it, I would say this show is incredibly serious. A very high tense drama. But you don't ever feel like you're pulled out of the experience when he talks to you.
Yeah, here's the thing.
And he's talking to you as an individual.
But he doesn't break what's going on behind him or around him. It's not a Zach Morris moment where he just freezes everything and then he can step out of the situation.
And in the first season, like you have these sides throughout, and you get used to them to the point where like if someone says something idiotic, he'll just give you a look at the
I know,
camera.
yeah,
and
exactly.
it's so funny.
They're really creative with how they
really
do that.
are.
Like sometimes he'll even like.
There's a strange level of intimacy there where you can even kind of anticipate what he's going to say.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And he's going to be like, when he gives you that eye roll look or something,
you
you're
kind
like,
of grow attached to it.
there
You
you
want
go.
him to talk to you again.
You do.
You want to hear
love
what's
this
going on in his
evil
brain.
man.
To the point where the second season opens with this beautiful episode where the entire episode he doesn't say a single word to you, but the episode ends with him washing his hands in the bathroom, looking in the mirror and saying, and looking at the camera in the mirror and saying, "Do you think I forgot about you?" And it's so interesting because you have this moment where he's acknowledging that he knows you're watching him.
Yeah.
And you kind of get condemned in that because
It's very voyeuristic.
He's a bad guy. Like, he is absolutely evil in what he does and what he executes, and yet you begin cheering for him. You want him to succeed. You get frustrated when he fails. And he knows that you're along for the ride, and he kind of almost mocks you for it. It's so good.
Again, like we said with Season 3 and the deconstruction of these characters a little bit, you can see that in the way that you see a conflict between him and Claire at one point, and the end of the episode is him looking at the camera and saying, "What are you looking at?"
Yeah.
And it ends there.
Well, he talks less
and then
and less
he talks
to you.
less
Well,
and less throughout the whole
and
season
and
until that last episode.
The more upset he is, the less he talks to the camera.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's like he doesn't get the same enjoyment about things are going worse for him.
Yeah.
So he gets to brag less. In essence.
Well, there's also nothing more to say, right? Like,
Yeah,
there's that like, you can see what's going on, and he doesn't have anything clever
But
to
it
deal with.
ends with that last episode where we don't hear him.
He doesn't say a single thing to you in the last episode at all. So you get this silence from the character that you're so used to hearing from.
It's fascinating.
And I've never seen a show that pulls an audience into becoming one of the characters, if you will. Like, you become so attached to hearing his brutal truths that when he's silent, you start worrying for the character, who, like I said, is not a good guy.
No.
Like, you shouldn't cheer for Frank Underwood, but you do.
Right.
And it's so interesting because there's
and in that way, it's Shakespearean.
Yeah. But
it's a lot like Richard III,
absolutely.
or Macbeth,
it's
or something
very
where
Shakespearean.
you don't actually want them to succeed, but you like them and they're interesting.
Well, it's
not even like The Godfather, even where they're still showing all of the positive traits of this character in this bad situation.
Well, it's like think about like Breaking Bad. You have the main character, Walter White, starts out at least as a very good guy. And he goes off this, goes into this darkness.
It's sort of a tragic,
right? The tragic hero. Where when I watched that series, I had a problem because I didn't like him that much because I would always be like, well, I don't know. Like, I get that you're saying you're doing this for your family, you're doing this for the right reasons, but you're still doing a very evil thing. Mm-hmm. Frank Underwood's the opposite. Frank Underwood is absolutely evil, knows he's evil, and doesn't care. And that makes me, strangely enough, grow attached to him and cheer for him to keep being evil.
There's something about honesty.
It's the thing where, exactly. At least he's honest.
He's absolutely honest.
And he's not trying to repackage what he's doing.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not doing what I think we all suspect politicians are actually, where they're taking their own ambitions and just sort of repackaging them as altruism.
No, he's incredibly honest, and it's interesting because every now and again you get to see that audience in the world itself. Like that beautiful speech in season 3.
It's really weird how much it's like when you're reading The Odyssey or Huck Finn or something like that, where you have a character who's constantly telling lies and stories. It's weird how much we buy into what he says to us and what he reveals to us.
Yeah.
It's weird how much we end up trusting him because we're the only ones that he's going to tell the truth.
Well, that's the Shakespeare side, right?
Exactly.
Whenever there's an aside in Shakespeare, it's always assumed to be the truth.
Exactly.
Well, it's like, I feel like
I'm not saying that he's not saying the truth.
Oh,
I'm saying that it's fascinating
you just
how much
it.
we buy into it.
Well, he has no reason to... We can't hurt him. He has no reason to lie.
We're like the only people he can talk to. And that's what makes it so interesting.
Yeah.
So, like, that alone makes the show worth watching, I'd say. The monologues and the asides alone, the writing is so good that you should just watch it just for that, just to get better at writing, because it's just, oh my gosh.
But it's still very... That's not the only good quality there, and it's not the only good character. Yeah. There's beyond Frank, beyond his monologues, beyond the asides, you get these fantastic moments of him playing off one another, and these are fantastic actors who can really engage with one another on just an incredible level. But with Frank and Claire, their relationship, how you see both what they're doing politically and how they connect to one another emotionally or aren't connecting, it's incredibly structured, and they are constantly using elements of the world around them to represent what's going on with their marriage.
What's that actress's name for Claire Underwood? It's Robin
Wright.
Wright.
Yeah.
Robin Wright her acting is just so good.
I think that she's as good, if not better, than Kevin Spacey, and that's not to say that Kevin Spacey's doing anything wrong whatsoever, but she just hits the subtleties.
Well, they're the perfect power couple to put on stage together.
Well, and one thing I like is that even though she's also kind of she's kind of like Frank, but there is this very subtle undergirding of empathy. Like you kind of get the impression she's actually still kind of human.
Yeah,
You know,
she makes tough calls and she does terrible things like Frank does. But unlike Frank, you get to see her visibly hurt by people and pretending that she's not.
And to the point that in this season where that facade sort of starts to fall
apart,
and you see more of her human side. You know, I've heard people criticize that. I completely believed it.
You know, I believe it too because
I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Because I loved how collected she was for so long. But yeah, I believe it. I certainly believe it.
One friend described the show when he said, "Matthew, you need to watch House of Cards." When the first season came out, and I'm like, okay, I don't know, I'm not into politics. And he said, no, you don't understand. This is a show where Richard III is married to Lady Macbeth, and that's just so true because Lady Macbeth, the character in Shakespeare, is this woman who makes those hard calls, like she covers her hands in blood. But in the end, you see it traumatizes her to the point of death. And
those
Claire,
other elements of herself which she couldn't repress resurface and kind of break her.
And Claire does the exact same thing where she wants to make the hard calls. She wants to be heartless. But she has a heart, and you can tell that, like subtly, it's tearing her apart. And the acting is so good because you don't, the actress.
Frank is able to constantly beat it back down into
she's like visibly struggling with it while keeping her cool.
She's much more struggling because part of that is because she's not feeling the positive effects of gaining the power like Frank is.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of what the show depicts about politics is it's like. It's like a contest of who can sort of suppress their emotions, their internal consciousness the most.
Actually,
and ultimately, Claire is the one who kind of loses the race.
She breaks,
but in a weird way, you don't like it's I don't know. She breaks, but it's not like a moment of weakness. It's like a moment of humanity where you're just like,
exactly,
good. You actually acknowledge that what you're doing is wrong and hurting people. Like it was like refreshing because
though at the same time I wouldn't give her the altruism completely. There's still a ton of selfishness that's going on within her, even within that within her motives there. It's not perfect, but it is a step away from what Frank and she have been doing.
Yeah, and their relationship also is very interesting. Like
it's
so well crafted and unique in marriage storytelling that I've never seen anything like it. And it's scary, but
I love how unique it is because the easy thing to do would have been to just make her Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And because First Lady, position of power herself, is also advancing as her husband advances. There are parallels. I'm not saying that these are those characters, but you could have easily fallen back into let's make this person like this, and then let the main character be an original thing. But this was a show that decided to give you all original characters.
Yeah. And put them in those political seats where you keep seeing those big names pop up.
Well, it's like I remember from one of the earlier seasons when Claire is describing how Frank proposed to her. He said, "I guarantee if you marry me, I guarantee you'll never be bored."
Yeah, and
that describes their relationship.
It does,
like,
And they have this I just the only way I could describe it is just watch the show because I've never seen a couple interaction like that where they both love each other, but they're also both power hungry. And they oh man, the way they talk to each other I love so much. Like there's one episode where Frank's doubting himself and she just says I'm always here to support you, but I will not tolerate your self-deprecation. Like she's like, I do not have time to put up with your picking on yourself. And it's just like these interesting moments where this is how you encourage your husband and it works. And it did. And it's just
strange because it kicks him back into shape.
It does, and they're weirdly perfect for each other.
Well, because
in that super villain way.
Because some people need that comforting.
Well, there's a lack of compassion to it. So it's like how else are they going to build each other up? They can't be sincere.
Yeah, no. They're brutal, and it's beautiful in that brutality.
Yeah.
But before we begin wrapping up, let's talk a little bit more about what we think about season 3 as a whole, because I know there's a difference between Kyle and I's take on it and yours.
Again, I have that issue of the fact that it did a great job of taking it to that massive scale, and then it brought it back down. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
But for me, there was this lag in the middle there. I didn't really care for the character of Dunbar, who was running against Frank. And some of the other choices there, I felt Jackie had been kind of dried out in a way. And it just became again, this season was emphasizing sort of the impotence, monotony of being the president, with him constantly going AmWorks, AmWorks, AmWorks.
Yeah.
And, you know, however you feel about a president's position on a particular thing, sometimes when they get onto that one bill or that one idea that they're trying to pass, it becomes the only thing that they're doing, and it becomes monotone. And because I binge watched it because it's Netflix.
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to do.
There was right there in the middle and towards the end, it just became so monotonous and droning that, and it didn't have as many of those amazing moments like the church scene.
Yeah.
Or those
powerful
monologues.
Yeah. It didn't have as many asides in the season.
And there were fewer of the asides. It lost some of the charm that was going on there, and it just became monotonous for me, and it wore on me.
I'm completely with you. I think it's very slower.
Still great.
Oh yeah.
Objectively, I can still say that, but it didn't measure up to what I had come. By deconstructing itself, it didn't measure up to the standard that I think it set by the first two seasons.
I think for me the fact that it brought things back to the characters, and I mean, especially in sort of the last third, you kind of see Claire sort of like a ticking time bomb.
Yeah.
For when she's going to break. I think the character element and that element of tension, it really held my attention all the way through. I actually found it a lot faster than the previous two seasons.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
That's so weird.
Yeah.
I haven't. But I will agree with you. The last arc in that story is the last episode of season 3 is one of the most stressful episodes I've ever seen. In a television show. It's just I was just shoulders all hunched up on my chair what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Because something clearly is going to happen, and the way it just ends...
She didn't show up. Why isn't she there?
Yeah, and just the way it ends just is so powerful, but only because the show's so focused on its characters. You could have that ending in another TV show, and people would be like, well, that wasn't really a climactic ending. But because of who the characters are in this show, it's so powerful. So different.
I will say that is one of the major strengths of this show, is it plays off sort of our presuppositions of whatever is going to happen, it's not going to be this thing.
Yeah.
For instance, the vice president is never going to go back to being a governor in the middle of
being a vice president.
In the middle of being the vice president.
Yeah.
That's just not going to happen. Or there's no way, spoilers, the first lady would ever leave the presidency.
Right.
And these sorts of things, they don't happen. And the second that this show decides to say, oh, that thing that you believed could never ever happen, here it is. Now think about all of the problems that's going to cause.
What can Frank possibly do about all this?
It's and playing with that, it's just so fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think that's how they manage to always accelerate things in a season.
Yeah.
Works for me.
All right. Well, I think we're about done with this because there's so much you can say about House of Cards.
You really can.
But I mean, frankly,
we didn't even get to the character of Doug Stamper.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about Stamper, who's
so good.
Yeah.
That actor. Jeez.
Just go watch the show.
Just watch the show.
It's really good. It's worth watching. It's worth thinking about. It's like I said, it's not my absolute favorite anymore, but it could easily be that depending on what season 4 is like.
Right, and this felt like, as much as Frank might be a placeholder, this was a placeholder for season 4.
Yeah, I agree for that. And the first 2 seasons alone make me forgive any of the problems I have with season 3 because it's just so good. But yeah, I think this is our first Netflix series we've discussed.
Yeah.
It is, actually.
And next month we're also planning on doing another Netflix series, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we're going to jump into Daredevil when that drops.
Yeah.
And that should be fun since we've done so much of the Marvel cinematic stuff.
Yeah, so it'll be good to...
And, I mean, Netflix is really interesting because it has this strange mix of the episodic television show, and it feels very cinematic.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
HBO,
HBO or
yeah.
AMC, like Breaking Bad, those sorts of things.
It's that high-quality television.
But it's built
drama,
for binge-watching as well, which I think is particularly fascinating.
I think that'll work really well with the Marvel Universe. I'm really curious
to see
what Daredevil's going to be like.
I'm binging it the night it comes out,
absolutely.
kind of a thing. I forget whatever's happening the next day. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
But so I'm excited to see more going on with Netflix, especially if it maintains the sort of quality that we're seeing in shows like this.
And we have no reason to think otherwise.
There's no reason to think otherwise.
It'll be interesting to see what the 2 powerhouses of Marvel and Netflix do together.
I think that would be, and I like that they're starting out with Daredevil, who is, as some have said, a different kind of A-lister. He's not. They're not scraping the bottom of the barrel for him.
No, they're picking up an interesting character. So
cool.
Yeah, be sure to join us next time for that, guys. But thank you for listening and watching, and we'll see you then.
See ya.
Bye.